that Chief Economic Advisor has already raised it. We need to really look at CPI numbers. So in the CPI numbers, it does show there is a declining trend, but still in some components we do see the pressure. So that reflects that there is a large demand constraint in the system, and I think it's very ripe for the central bank to go for a rate cut at this moment. This is much lower than what RBI is targeting at 6% for January 2016. So overall, although I don't buy this deflation kind of a story, but right now there is a huge demand constraint in the system, which may not really help reviving the investment cycle that both central bank as well as central government is trying for. So if you want to really revive that, I think one needs to bring back demand system, particularly in the rural segment. I think we should really focus more on the CPI numbers rather than talking about WPI indicator.
Okay, Mr. Desai, I'd like to ask you here, do the WPI figures really indicate how things are going in the economy, or would you agree with what Professor Bhanumurthy says, that we need to really take tough calls on what exactly should be an indicator of how the economy is performing, and WPI maybe it hides a lot rather than revealing things?
When I was in the finance ministry, I used to get a call every Thursday evening on the latest figure for WPI. So I'm quite in love with WPI, and I also like CPI. I look at both of them together, and I look at individual prices, and this is how one learns. For example, this is an extraordinary phenomenon. For the first time in India's history in many years, prices are falling. Yeah. How on earth can this happen in this country? We are wedded to inflation and we are having deflation. What's gone wrong with us? It's a very interesting question, I think.
No, but why is that really happening? I mean, what are the reasons that one can gauge here?
My view is, well, you just have to look at the figures. It is all due to fracking. The Americans invented fracking and started fracking their rocks, underground rocks, and started producing oil, and as a result they became independent of Arab oil. The demand for Arab oil fell enormously, so world prices of oil have fallen by 19% in the last year. You multiply this by the weight of oil and oil products in WPI, which is about 10%, and you get 1.8%, and the actual decline has been 1.9%. So 90% of the decline is imported. It is due to a fall in international prices of oil.
So that's one of the major factors, Mr. Agarwal, which is why you see that the WPI figures remain in this, so to say, the dead zone, which many say is going to be the state until 2016 too.
What Mr. Desai has said, and I agree with Mr. Murthy also, because in isolation we cannot see these figures. We have to see the ground reality also, and we see some sort of inflation on the agri commodities and the pulses and the onions. So we have to look into that aspect also. But these indicator or whatever figures these indexes say, they are just a guiding principle on the policy decision making. They will not show the ground reality of inflation and other things. The government should be cautious on this thing, that they will not actually indicate how inflation is at present or what will be the ground reality. They can be considered in relation to their earlier figures, but we have to look into the other factors also for decision making. We have to see what is the demand, but we see that one side we are feeling the deflation is there not because of WPI figure falling, but actually the demand is not picking up. Right. That is what the industrialists have been talking about, that therefore the investment from the private sector is not coming about. And on the one side, and then we feel that the agro commodities prices are moving ahead. So the government is aware of these things, limitations of the statistical figures. Where we have to act is that we have to contain the food items inflation there we are seeing inflation that has to be taken care of, and our decision making and policy making should not be merely dependent on these figures, and we are cautious on these things. We have to move about on the demand side, push for the economy. We have to control food price inflation. We have to tackle the capital formation from reduction of the interest rates that we are asking for the RBI to do it. So these all figures are just supportive indicators or supportive data for the government to function or take decisions.
Okay.
These limitations we have to understand, then we should go into the actual numerical figures on these indexes.
But Mr. Pant, can you please enlighten us a bit more on this? Because, you know, when these figures show you that the WPI inflation is in the negative zone, as has been reported, the food basket inflation also remained in the negative zone. And since the WPI has been in that zone since the November of last year, what does it really say about, you know, its impact on the market prices? Because you don't really seem to be watching some sort of impact on the market. One would say that WPI directly may not be the factor that might just have that impact. But then one would like to know, what does this really mean for an average householder in this country?
Well, if you look, a lot of discussion is taking place about the divergence between the two inflation measures.
Yeah.
So you have the WPI on one hand and the CPI on other hand. The CPI is the one which common public or the consumer face. But since the CPI is there, we should not throw WPI in dustbin. I agree with most of the things what Bhanumurthy has said. What WPI is telling us, it is what in the US on the developed world we have the producer's price index. This is the prices which the wholesaler or the manufacturers are selling the goods at those prices.
Right.
You can straight away look at the trajectory of WPI. You can straight away correlate it with the